Hey guys, Ted here for the Racers Racing iRacing League with the Corvette C6R at Circuit of the Americas. So we did a little bit of a race sim here, and I got down to a 202.631. You can see over here my split times. Optimal this session was a 202.4. Overall, I could have gotten a 202.2 with a little bit different setup in Sector 2. So 103-degree track, so maybe a little bit hotter than what our session may be in the race. But take you around for lap round COTA here, and then we'll go a little bit more in depth. Alright, so I managed to keep that all on track. Haven't had any incidents or off tracks yet, so we're all clear on that. Alright. So a couple things to note here with Circuit of the Americas and this Corvette in particular. It takes a long time to get up to temp. So if you go out there and you start turning laps and you're far slower than a 202, don't feel really discouraged because it takes a long time for the tires to get up to that temp. I can't even run a 203 until lap 3, and again, that was really close. So, if you're starting off and you're up in the the 208s, don't get discouraged at all, and know that keep driving on the tires, and eventually the lap times will fall. It's almost like you hit a cliff. Like right at the the third lap here, I was coming around. It was like a 204 all the way up until like the last two corners, and all of a sudden I shaved off like 3/10 and dropped into the 203. So it's literally like a light switch like that these tires come on. Three laps into the run, and then they get even faster again, 6, 7 laps into the run, and you just gain a lot more performance for whatever reason. It's literally like just steps. All of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm all of a sudden 2/10 faster. Just again, don't get discouraged right away if it's a little bit slower. The pace will come with more laps and more time just in the car. Okay, so with that, we'll start off here. Start of the lap coming up to turn 1. So my brake marker for turn 1, it's there's not really any defined markers or anything, but what I'm looking for over here on the right side of the fence are these kind of braced fence posts, and I'm looking for the braced fence post that starts right at about the same time as this grandstand over here is the one I'm looking for. So it's this one here in particular before this little light post camera hanging up over the track here. So if you see that guy, you've gone a little bit too far. So this is the guy I'm looking for over here on the right. Once I get to there, I hit the brakes. And I'm going to kind of turn the wheel in, so I'm not braking up in a straight line, but I'm not heading right towards the apex. We can kind of see the grass and a little bit of red apex curb there. We don't want to aim quite at that. I want to aim kind of right in the center of the track. So I'm going to pitch the car in with the steering wheel to right there, but I'm going to keep a really straight wheel as I do all my braking up the hill here. You can use a lot of brake pressure right away, and you really want to trail it off. And in the Corvette, when you go to turn into the corner, you don't want to have any brake on. If I tried to turn the wheel into the corner right now, that's a great way to get the rear end to slide out and not only lose control of the car, spin out, but lose a lot of time. So that's something super critical, not only here, but everywhere you drive the Corvette, is to get all your braking done in a straight line. So you see now that I've come up, I've crested over the hill. Can't quite see the apex, but basically once I've crested to the top of the hill is when I'm going to start to turn into the corner, and you'll notice that that my brake starts to really trail off there all the way down. I don't want to hit this apex on the left here. Because it will upset the car. I want to try and get close to it. I put in a lot of steering lock now, and I'm completely out of all brake and all throttle to get the car rotated around. Once I get to that apex and the car starts to rotate, I'll put in a little bit of throttle to help kind of drive the car straight out of there and keep the rear end balanced. And even though this car has traction control, I really want to focus on not using the traction control. I want to try and drive it as if I don't have it and use it as more of a safety net than just power it and let the traction control do its thing, because it's really stuttery, and especially with the elevation changes and just the nature of this track, it will really upset the car and you will lose a lot of time. So you notice I go to about half throttle. I get the wheel entirely straight as I head down the hill, and that's when I can get up to full throttle. And I think there's a little chirp of the tires here on the back end as I'm coming out. So we'll go kind of rewind here with the chase cam so we can see exactly our placement on the track. See a lot of guys run really wide here on exit. Don't necessarily need to. Seen guys go really deep into the corner. I found that's not the quickest way. Really deep in and then turn out. I found trying to get close to this apex curb without actually touching it, just like this, and turning the wheel once you've basically landed up here on this plateau is usually the most consistent and fastest way. In other words, don't be driving up in here and then cranking the wheel back. Don't be driving in too deep here and coming way wide over here onto the curbing, because then you're basically super slow over here trying to turn back onto the track, avoid the off track, and try and pick up speed down the hill as someone else taking a line like this is already going to be going past you down there. So just not quite ideal there. All right, so one more time in real speed. And so it almost feels like I'm going like too slow, and I'm just kind of hesitating, and I'm waiting there. Just have to be real patient mid-corner in this car, especially. It feels like an eternity that I'm just sitting there like, oh, I need to be on throttle, I need to be on brake. No, just let it sit, just let it ride. That's how this track is. It really rewards being patient. So coming down to turn 2 here. I give a little bit of a lift. I don't want to slide the rear end out. I want to try and stay mid-track. It's a pretty easy turn in just right here on the curb. You could probably take it flat, but I like to try and just modulate a little bit because I'm not losing a whole lot of time, just so I can set up better for the S's up ahead, because that's where we can lose a lot of time. In turn 2, you're not going to gain any time by keeping it flat through there. I'd like to end up right here middle of the track, and that's why I give that little lift right there going through turn 2. So start of the S's. As we come up under the first bridge here, we'll just start to get a first glimpse of the curb here to our left into the first corner. So this is incredibly important to get a good run up to and through this first curb here, because this will really dictate how the next couple corners go, and that's basically how this whole section is. It's really hard to put any emphasis on a specific corner, but it's basically just one long string back the entire portion of the track here. As I come into this, I want to get the car pretty close to the yellow sausage curb here without actually going over it. And we'll see I'll start to drop out of throttle pretty soon as I've already turned in and started arcing in. And by the time I actually get to the sausage curb, I'm completely out of the throttle because this car can't quite handle it coming up to the right one. So I'll actually give a little tap of the brakes. Not too much. Notice that as I get the car straighter and my hands are straight, I'll increase the brake pressure a little bit because if I just stab the brakes with any steering input into the car, it's going to slide it a little bit. So notice brake increases as my hands are straight. But then as I turn right into the second corner, again trying to avoid the yellow sausage curb, I'm going to ease back off of the brake, had a downshift there. Back a little bit of throttle to help just kind of keep my mid-corner pace up, but again, just a little trail brake, and it's just a lot of coasting through here, and just really important timing and turning the wheel so that I can get close to these yellow sausage curves without actually hitting them, because it'll really upset the car and send us wide. Once I get to the third one here, I can give it a little bit bigger burst of throttle because this next corner here, it's a really long double apex right-hander, and so it really increases the radius. So I can give that throttle to increase the radius of the car and keep it going through there. So back in a cockpit view. I'm down into third gear now. See, so I get back in throttle, not quite to full throttle though, as I turn right again, trying to clip this first sausage curb here, and you can kind of drive up to this one again, just like the first curbing here at the start of the S's. And now I'm playing a little bit of a waiting game. I'm trying to adjust my line here, not with the steering wheel, but with throttle and brake. So if I need a little bit longer radius, I'll add a little bit of throttle. If I need a little bit shorter, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of brake to help pull the nose of the car back in. But either way, I'm not going to be sawing at the wheel. That's the last thing I want to do is upset the suspension of the car. But now the second apex is pretty hard to find for this corner. It's basically right where you go underneath the Pirelli bridge. There is where you want to hit the second apex. It's really late here in the corner. And so here I've adjusted it, and so you see it's kind of like a sharp kink here, right at the Pirelli bridge is where I want to hit my second apex, and we can get the car pretty far onto, if not the right side tires over the red and white curbing here as I come under it. So again, I've had a nice tight apex there, so I can get a little bit more throttle in because the car is turning pretty nicely, but I want to end up mid to right side of the track to prep for the next couple corners up here. So again, not quite full throttle, certainly not enough to engage the traction control, but just enough to kind of pick up my my speed. So I'm just rolling a bit more speed as I come through here. Get over the right side of the track. Then I'm going to back out, back in the brakes. Still in third gear as I turn into this corner. So this is a pretty important apex to hit for me. I find as long as you can hit this apex, it'll really help tie together the last bit of the S's. If you find yourself consistently going wide here, that's usually change your line a little bit in the prior corner where you hit the apex underneath that Pirelli bridge, so you can have enough time to have the car settled and then turn into this corner here. Again, we don't want to hit the yellow sausage curb, but we want to get down pretty close to it. And that was just I did all my braking back there, and it's just kind of a coast here. Again, I'm just patiently waiting in the car until I actually get to that sausage curb, and then I can give it a little bit more throttle to help kind of drive it back around the track here to the left side. Notice I keep getting out of the throttle, trying to change my line back here. It's not, this is the point you get on throttle. It's it's a lot of adapting to the car. But again, these are all smooth inputs. It's very smooth and slow and controlled. I'm not stabbing on it. I don't want to upset the car in any way, especially as we're cornering here. Come back over to the left side of the track, and so this is a pretty tricky two corners here because it's very blind. Very hard to see the left-hander here and kind of where we really want to go. So need to be pretty nice approach in here. Usually I'm still in third gear, but I'll oftentimes come down to second gear here for this corner. So that's what I did right there. And how you want to take this corner and line up for the next one is I want to straddle this red and white curb and put the right side tires over here on the red. You have to be careful not to go too far over and bring the left sides over the white line, but I want to be straddling this curb as I keep a lot of steering angle into it. And now basically my reference I'm looking for is we can see this red and white curbing ends right here. So basically I want to take the right side tires, I want to keep them on this red and straddle this curbing all the way up until the curbing ends. So I want my right side tires to go right over this curbing as I turn left into this corner, just as the apex is right now starting to come into view here. There's a little bit of a dip there on the track for the left-hander. And so right about now that I can see that apex, and so I can see kind of the line I need to take of keep bending it around to the right here until my right side tires get right to the end of this curbing, and then I'm going to hook it back to the left. And so because I can see through the corner there, I can start to add that little bit of throttle. And again, it's not much. It's real gentle, up to only about 50%. Now I'm going to turn the car back straight. So we can see it turned a little bit early, couldn't quite get the right side tires all the way up to the end of the curbing there, but you can see how clearly we're straddling this curb here with the car. And as I come up to here, I've turned the wheel back straight, and I'm trying to get a bit of a late apex here again, avoiding the yellow sausage curbs. As always here at COTA. Still not quite full throttle because we still have yet to really crest this hill. There's a little bit of a dip here, and we get it quite off camber as we come up here and crest over the hill. So if I'm on too much throttle here, you'll have a real tendency to drive wide because the car gets extremely light, especially the rear end as we come up over here. And last thing I want is to just walk the car right off of the track here. Let's get down left side tires. Right down onto that sausage curb. Again, apexing just after it. So you notice I'm apexing just here, just after this yellow sausage curb. Still not full throttle yet. Easing back in. Shift lights coming on there because the rear of the car is getting real light, starting to get a little bit of wheel spin. So that's why I'm checking here with the throttle or with the steering wheel. Upshift to third gear, a little bit of a short shift. Almost, and then I can get to full throttle once the car is pretty planted and I'm heading straight, and I will end up right here on the curb. So no chance of flying over. If you come a little bit too far over and get the right side tires onto the green, you will pick up that off track. So it's basically once the car's kind of settled up here on top of the hill, that's when I can get back up to throttle and drive it straight. Okay, so that was a long section all the way through the S's. Let's play back through that one more time in real speed, all the way from turn one. So again, really want to focus in this section on being patient. That's in the throttle, brake, and also the steering. Not jamming on either with any steering input in the car. Being really smooth on the steering and not adjusting or sawing at the steering wheel mid-corner. And just being patient on on the throttle and brake use and just letting the car coast. I want to roll speed. I don't want to be constantly trying to speed up or slow down. I just want to keep a nice consistent average speed through this whole section here. Okay, and that was finally the S's. Now we're almost halfway through the lap, and sorry this is going to be a long video, but COTA is a long, difficult track. So next corner here on the downhill, you just kind of have to pitch into it. It's kind of hard to see, but I don't want to get too far over this curb here because there is another big dip here, and that will kind of upset the rear end, and you can end up spinning out and coming into the wall down here. So I like to try and stay a little bit off of it. There's no, it's you just kind of have to turn into it, but again, you want to try and avoid this curb if possible, and it's pretty easy not to go too wide. So my braking point for the hairpin down here, what I'm looking for is after this this pavement ends, but before the 100 board and this and the white mark here. It's kind of about halfway in between both of those is where I'm braking. You can kind of push it up to here, but again, then you're coming in. It's not super composed, the car coming into the corner, and so I don't like quite pushing it quite that deep. So again, here we are about midway through. This again, another pretty heavy brake zone, and you'll notice again I'm doing all of my my braking in a straight line here. So I'm not turning into the corner again. Steering input with a lot of brake in this car, it's a bad time. I'm only going to come down to second gear for this hairpin. Same thing as in turn 1. I want to try and avoid using first gear if possible because it really jolts the car, and especially in corners like this, you have a real tendency to overslow the car and kind of chirp the rear tires and spin them out. So second gear, you get really low in the revs, but this car has a lot of torque that will overcome that. So basically, once if I brake there at that point, done all my braking in a straight line, again, it's really hard to see this apex, completely blocked by the A-pillar, especially if you have a little bit less point of view, no VR to be able to see into it. But basically, once I've come all the way slowed down is when I'll turn into the corner. Notice as I start to turn in the wheel, I'm rapidly releasing off of the brake so that I come into it with just very minimal trail brake, if nothing at all. I'm trailing that all the way down. Like to try and get close to this apex. This was a pretty ideal line here. Not hitting, you can kind of run over this yellow curb here, but it can kind of upset the car a little bit. So I like to, if possible, get right down to only the red and white, if not touch it at all and be slightly off it. But I want to get kind of close to that and shoot for a bit of a later apex, despite this being quite a point, so I can get back to throttle. So notice once I get right here to this apex, I've trailed down to that apex. Let the car just pivot right there, and then I'm back on throttle, starting to ease into it again as if I don't have traction control. It's a nice slow ease back into the throttle as the car starts to track out until I get the car pointed straight down the straightaway, and then I can get into that full throttle. So it's not to trip the rear tires, not to bog it down with the traction control and lose time down the very long straight here. So I'll play through that corner one more time, real speed here. All right, coming down end of the straightaway. My brake marker that I'm looking for, again, I'm using the grandstand as reference, and that happens to be the 150 board. There's so many brake markers over here, and they're coming up so fast, it's really hard to actually read the numbers, at least I find, because I think they start at like 400, and there's one every 50 yards all the way down to the corner. So I'm looking for the grandstand here, and I'm looking for the number board right at the grandstand. Is again the one I'm looking for. So in this case, that's the 150. Once I get to the front of the car to the 150, heavy brake zone again. Steering wheel straight, keeping the car straight, and I'm only coming down to second gear here. There we go, straight brake zone. No input of the wheel whatsoever. Just getting this car slowed down. If I start to put any input in, I'm going to make this corner too tight. Spin the rear of the car. Extremely easy. Now I've got it slowed all the way down. Again, I got the apex somewhat in sight there. All the way down to second gear. Turn into the corner. Rapidly release off that brake. Trail just that little bit to keep it composed to the corner. I get down to the apex. Off gas. Off the brake. Right onto the gas. Again, not too hard into it. Trying to avoid the traction control. And full throttle once I've gone through the corner. So pretty straightforward there. How we have to do this car. Okay, coming up, stadium section. This is another tricky section without many brake markers, and this is another one that requires, I'd say, even more patience than the S's at the start of the lap. There's no real good brake marker here for the first corner. Basically, I'm looking where this green mat starts. It's a little bit after that. I'm usually looking, there's kind of like a darker spot in the pavement. I can kind of see like right here is a little bit change, from right here to right there. It's kind of what I'm using as, my brake reference coming in there. But it's really just getting a feel for it. But if anything, brake early for this corner. Don't brake too late. So again, here once I've passed the green, fake grass on the side of the track there, before I've gotten to this darker spot of pavement is when I'm going to brake. It's again braking early for this corner. Down to second gear, straight on the brakes. Once I start to turn into the corner, trailing off the brakes, as has been the story all track here. Turning in, so these are more big sausage curbs, and I want to try and avoid upsetting the car in them and getting down nice and close to them, again with the rear of the car. So once I've gotten turned down to there, I can start to get back in throttle, and this is where it takes a lot of patience in the throttle because it's really easy to get into that TC. And so this is the mode you have to think, I'm not driving with any traction control. I have 600 horses. It has to be real easy coming through here. So as I'm only up to about 3/4 throttle, and that also helps me keep a little bit of steering input in the car. So I want to clip this apex right here on the right. I don't want to drive too far over it, otherwise I'll pick up a 1X, but I basically want to try and straddle this curbing here. It doesn't upset the car at all, and so I can be straight through this next two little angles here over to the left-hand side. So basically, not until I've gotten to this curb and gotten completely through here that I can get back into throttle and give it a little bit of burst straight. See, I've waited for the car to come all the way straight, all the way through that corner before I actually give it that full throttle and drive it straight. And even then, it's only just a tiny little burst that I'm given. Just start to pitch a little bit to the left as I start to look for this corner right here. Keeping my eyes from here all the way through the very tight apex up here. It's kind of my eyes and line I'm thinking through here. And notice I back out incredibly early, about where this curbing ends, way earlier than the corner up here. This is a really tricky brake zone because we have to do a little bit of turning in this car, which is very tricky under the brakes. So notice I give a lot of brake pressure there. I ease off the brakes as I have to start putting some steering input into it, and I don't want to take this in too tight here into this apex. I'm going to end up a pretty wide corner and almost kind of diamond the corner off and drive in down to this point, get the car turned, and then power out of it. Is kind of how I'm driving this section here. So notice it's just very little brake pressure as I'm putting this steering input into the car, and completely off here. You see very early prior to the corner. So this is just backing up this brake zone as far as possible so that I'm not braking and turning at the same time, because that's what will kill you in this car. Try not to jump too much of this curb here. It can kind of upset the car, but if you get like anywhere close to the red and white here on exit, you will pick up a 1X. So I like to make sure I get down to this curb here and do not go wide on exit. And so that's waiting to get on throttle until I've gotten the car completely straight. So once I've gotten there to the apex, I can start to get on throttle. And again, I'm waiting until I get completely straight, because if I got on full throttle right now, I'm just going to drive, lift the front of the car and just drive it right off and pick up that 1X and validate that lap time. So I've gotten completely straight. Now I can get back to full throttle. So again, it's just being super patient there through that section. So we'll play through that sequence of corners one more time here in real speed. So if there was a corner on the track to use first gear, that would be it, is that corner right there. But again, I don't like going down to it because you will overslow the car and you won't be able to roll as much speed at the apex. And it really upsets the car, the downshift and the upshift out of first gear. So I stay in second gear there through that whole section. So coming up for the super long right-hand corner here, there's a couple apexes that we really have to hit with this car. Some of the formula cars, it's not important to hit any of the apexes. In this car, it's very, very important. So there's two kind of real early ones. It's not necessarily here, but it's right after. Entering mid to left-hand side of the track, trying to swoop in. You don't want to take a narrow approach into here. This car does not turn well. So as I'm turning into the corner, I'm backing out of the throttle. Went up to fourth gear here, and I'm backing out, and so it's not this first curbing here, it's the second bit of curbing. I want to make sure I hit this curbing right here. Super important, and so that's the first apex I'm looking for. So you'll notice I get completely out of the throttle to get the car turned down to there, and this is, again, I have to be really patient on the throttle. So once I've gotten the car turned down to there, I can start to give it, a little bit. I'm just, constantly changing my my radius here as I look for the next apex coming into view. Is when this little straight ends, and I can see more curbing there. I want to try and get the car down there. This is where kind of varies. Different cars is kind of how you exit this corner, whether you have to hit this apex or the next kind of point in this corner or not. I think in this car it's pretty important to get down there so we don't track out too wide. Here I can start to ease in a little bit more full throttle. Usually I'm a little bit more hesitant on this particular lap. I got in throttle pretty early, but I still clipped this last apex here. But because I was on throttle so early, I end up driving a little bit wide, and I'm really scrubbing the front tires right now and just overheating them and driving quite wide out of the corner. I usually like to try and end up, about half a car length over, about mid-track coming out of here, because then I don't have to swoop back to the right side of the track quite as aggressively. So again, that was just I was a little bit overzealous and getting the throttle a little bit too soon. Didn't hurt me too much here, but again, just to be a little bit more consistent every lap, it's waiting to get in the throttle here in this corner. Just play through this one more time, real speed. Okay, so for the left-hander up here, this is, I'd say, the hardest corner at Circuit of the Americas to actually hit because it is so blind. You have this little crest here, and you cannot see this apex whatsoever. And unlike in real life, there are no brake markers over here on the fence. There's nothing to tell you where or when this corner is coming up. So basically how I drive it is I get over to that far right-hand side of the track, and again, it's real subtle, but there's kind of like a darkness of the track here. It kind of starts right here about, I think that signboard's way back, but it's right after the red curbing ends. You can kind of see that little bit of darkness right there. It's only a couple car lengths after this red curbing ends. So basically, as soon as I can get back to the right side of the track, I'm going to start braking for this corner. In this case, I was really wide here, so I really have to come back quite aggressively over to the right and start braking. And I'm actually pointed, completely opposite of the corner, which is not ideal. I want to be pointed straight here on the track because remember, turning and braking in this car is not a good time. I find it's much more helpful to be composed and to turn in early into this corner than to turn in too late, because the track it really slopes off downhill here. It's really easy if you turn in too late. You're never making it to that apex, and you're going wide. Unlike in real life, you will pick up a 1x going over the curbing there. But in this particular instance, you can straddle over the sausage curb quite aggressively, if not hit it completely. So again, constantly adjusting a little bit of brake to bring my radius down, but I'm waited again really patient on throttle until I've gotten all the way to this curb before I can start feeding back in. Because the track's dropping off, it's really easy to just drive it a little bit too wide here. Getting back in throttle, back to full throttle, and able to keep it on track here, no problem. Coming up for the last corner, it's another tricky one because of the elevation changes, and it's quite slippery. I'm looking for this access road right here as my brake marker for this corner. Again, only going to be coming down to second gear. I believe I'm in fourth gear here. Again, doing a straight straight brake zone. It feels like I'm braking quite a bit early for this corner, but as you can see, there's quite a bit of elevation change here as we come through the corner. So I want to try and get a late apex on this so I can get on throttle as soon as possible down the straight. If I'm coming in, an early apex and I have to do any sort of turning after I've hit the apex, it's going to really upset the rear end of the car as I kind of transition the car over these elevation changes here in the track. So it's down to second gear. As I turn in, I'm trailing off the brake. Again, no brake and turning at the same time. Just a little correction there. This is another sausage curb that you can ride over. You can straddle a little bit, don't want to go too far over, otherwise you'll pick up that 1X. Get it completely rotated, start to get on throttle there as I come up, and just mind the rear end. Let the car completely climb up over this hill. It's really light right now. Let the car settle over here, pointed straight, and then I can get into full throttle. Car's settled right there, get into full throttle and just manage that last little bit. Let the TC just kick in right there a little bit, but keep a really nice run down the straightaway and over the line for the lap. So play back through these last two corners here one more time, real speed. All right, and so there we have a 2026 lap around COTA. Sorry for the long video, but it's a very tough track, especially in this car. So I've seen Lawrence just put up a poll saying we may not race here, but I just thought I'd like to get this video out in case anyone wants to do more practice or race this car or any other car here in the future. I think there's some good tips in here about how to brake the Corvette and just the overall patience needed, not only at Circuit of the Americas, but just the patience needed to drive this car quick in general at any track. And that's the biggest mistake I've seen, especially on those cold tires. Those first couple laps, you have to over-exaggerate that driving technique, the patience and the braking in the straight lines. Over-exaggerate those first couple laps. And may actually put together a little video here on how to drive this car on cold tires. Depending on whatever track we're coming up to next. So that's a lap around COTA. Hope you guys enjoyed and hope it helps you out. Again, just practice. Be patient. Lap times will come. It's a very tricky track. There are a lot of corners to remember. So just the more laps you can do, the better. I think so far to get to this point, I've had to put in probably 2.5, close to 3 hours worth of track time just to get down to this consistency this time. So don't feel bad if it's taking a while to get up to speed or whatsoever. Setup, I'll post it in the Discord and likely on Facebook too, especially depending on wherever track we end up racing this week. So thanks for watching, everyone.